Hello, guys. Thank you for joining the 80 level roundtable today. And today we have a special guest with us, Alena from Limited Run Games. And Limited Run Games is a company that's doing physical releases of different video games. They work with AAA companies as well as with indies. And we're going to talk about digital distribution, how games are being sold, and why do people actually still buy physical copies?
Greetings and welcome to the 80 Level Roundtable podcast. In each episode, host Kirill Tokarev invites video game industry leaders to talk about the world of game development. No topic is off limits as long as it relates to video game development. New episodes are in the works, so remember to follow us or subscribe and share with someone you know will also enjoy the podcast.
Alena, hi. Thank you so much for doing the call with us today. So I have kind of like this introductory question I want to ask you. And I guess this is the kind of thing that everybody is in the game space wants to know. And the question is, why do we still have physical copies of games? Like, haven't we, moved past that, couple, maybe a decade ago or something, right? Why are there still, and it's not just your company, right? It's not just Limited Run Games. It's just like if you go to Best Buy or if you go to Target, there are gonna be DVDs there, there are gonna be CDs there, and there are gonna be games in boxes there. So why are they still there? Like, what does the market look like?
Yeah, wow, that is definitely a big question to tackle. But I mean, I think, the main, just like really what it boils down to is fans, gamers, they still want their physical media in a lot of cases. I mean, it would seem that the industry is going towards a digital only future, and it probably is, but I don't think it's there yet, and we're not close to being there yet. I mean, I think Limited Run is a really good use case whereof we only print limited versions of physical games, but they always do really well. And there is a huge demand for it still. People love seeing it on their shelf. As you can see, everyone here at Limited Run, we're all collectors ourselves. Like, we love having that physical copy. And me personally, I love being able to, share my games, have it forever. If something happens, like if, PlayStation Store goes down for the PS3, the Vita, or eShop goes down for DS or whatever it is, we'll still have those physical copies forever. And I think that's really important for a lot of collectors who grew up with these games and love these games.
You mentioned an interesting point there that like when you're on contemporary platform, be that Steam or PlayStation Store or Nintendo eShop, you don't technically own anything, right? I mean, you sort of do, but at the same time, you don't really, like, if the internet is down, basically you don't have anything, right? At the same time, I guess it was like a lot for me to, and for other people as well, to digest when kind of all consoles suddenly became always on and always connected. Right? Because before that, we never had that, right? The PlayStation 2 games, they don't really require any internet.
Yeah, it was very subtle how it happened. I feel like first it was like, oh, you can play online with people, and then it was like, oh, make an account, and then we'll track your progress, and then from there, it just kind of snowballed into kind of what it is.
What we have right now, yeah. And so in this kind of situation where, all those electronic shops are popping off everywhere, how did kind of Limited Run Games start? Like, what were maybe your first projects or kind of the first games that you worked on, and how did you guys kind of develop your current business strategy and approach?
Yeah, so it's actually a pretty wild and also kind of sustainable story in a way. One of our co-founders, Josh Fairhurst, also founded Mighty Rabbit Studios, which is a development company. So he did, with that development company, he did a game called Breach and Clear and Saturday Morning RPG. And basically what happened was he was worried that his development studio was going to fold and that they weren't going to be able to make any more games. And he also had in his head, and also if any of these, stores that my game is on goes down, I will have nothing to show for all this hard work that I put in for these last few years. So it really started from, he wanted, as a developer himself, he wanted his own physical game that he spent all this time and effort with his whole development team. And so basically they funded, with the very last money that they had, they funded a very small physical run, about as small as you can do for his game, and it sold out instantly, just so fast. And so that's where the idea came, like, hey, maybe there's something here, because in addition to people still wanting physical media, there's also other developers like me, like small indie developers, that really would love to see their game physical, and that's really important to them. So that's kind of where it started. And it's a very sustainable model, because how limited run works is, in the early days, we used to basically order like minimum quantities that we could. So we're talking, we would print games that were, 1,000 copies, 1,500 copies, and that's it. Like we never reprint. Nowadays, we kind of do a thing that's similar to a Kickstarter model, in which we'll pre-order up front and we'll only create the amount that's been ordered. So if 3,000 copies get ordered, then we'll make 3,500 copies or 4,000 copies for replacements and to sell in the future, but we never actually reprint games. So very sustainable. You're never going to see any of our games in the clearance bin, and the value usually goes up. So yeah.
When you have this limited run, do you think that it improves the value for the client? Do you feel like if it's like with the sneakers that the companies are pushing out, right? Or like when there's like some kind of scarcity, people suddenly begin to value it more?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a side effect that wasn't intended, but is just kind of happening. Like from the very beginning, it was never, let's make these games very scarce and limited so the value is crazy and they sell out. It was never like that. It was always like from a very sustainable standpoint of not overprinting. And that's why before limited run and before this kind of like limited print bubble started happening, you were seeing less and less games being published physically. Like even from big retailers, you would see like, hey, there's these really cool remaster games, but they're not going to stores, because it is a really huge investment to print all those copies and put it in traditional retailers. So in addition to, having to pay those retailers 20 to 30% on every copy, you also have to pay to actually print the copy and everything else that goes along with it. So it just started going down the path of it just not making sense for a lot of developers and publishers to print physical games. So we think what we did here was really the solution, the kind of in between of going full on retail and not having anything at all. And I do think that a side effect of it being like, a small run of a game, that the value does go up. It is kind of like the sneaker thing. Like, hey, maybe not many people knew about Shantae back when we first printed the physical Shantae, so now the value's way up. But that was never the intention for us. But it is a side effect.
Alena, so can you talk a little bit about the production process, right? So with digital games, it's pretty straightforward. Like you upload the whatever you have, the files, and then it's ready for distribution. But with physical games, it's quite different. I mean, you have to print the actual discs. You need to make the packaging. There is probably some copyright that has to go on the box. There are also a lot of like supplementary materials that you can add. I mean, there are books inside the boxes, and there's a bunch of other stuff. How do you guys work with this? Like, what are kind of the biggest challenges that you've, or maybe even like what lessons did you learn over your career about printing games? Because me personally, I had a couple of projects that are physical, and I know that in the physical world is quite different from whatever you do in digital space, and it's there are things appearing that you never thought you would have a problem with that, like even like the distribution itself, and the delivery logistics, that's only like one part of it. Like what are kind of the main discoveries that you made, and how are you, solving these problems?
Yeah, I mean, the actual production side of things is a massive undertaking that I feel like many people they don't know all the moving parts that it goes into. And especially with our customer base, it does take us typically longer to ship games than your traditional retailer because we don't go into production until after um, our pre-orders close. So every retailer, it takes them this long to make a game. The difference is they've done it in advance because they just order a ton of copies. We're only doing exactly what gets ordered. So, I mean, there's so many things that even if the digital version has it done, sometimes you have to re-replicate it for the physical version. For example, anytime you create a physical game, you have to get it rated with the ESRB, even if the digital version is already. So that takes a lot of time. If we publish something that hasn't been out in America, which we've done a handful of games that were only published in Japan, like River City Girl Zero, then you have to get translators and you have to get localizers to actually translate and localize things like a manual or images or assets and stuff like that. And then right now in the supply chain, there's so many crazy things going on that it's been causing delays for everyone. So yeah, there's just so much that goes on into like printing a physical copy, even down to like, hey, we need to print these coins. Like, where do we print them from? If it's a thing that we've never printed before, we kind of have to see where we can do that. And then for us, we actually ship all in-house. So we ship from Raleigh, North Carolina. So some of the stuff gets printed domestically, some of it gets printed internationally, but it all gets shipped here to be put together and sent to the customer.
So tell us a little bit about the developers that you work with, and who are those companies? Are they like big or small? And how is this relationship structured? Like, do you work as a publisher or like a distributor? Where do how does it work?
Yeah, so we've worked with everything from indie companies to big AAA studios. So through the course of the limited run lifespan, we've worked with everyone from Naughty Dog. We've worked with Universal, with Netflix, and recently we started working with Konami, which we just published Castlevania, and now we have Contra on sale on our website right now. So we've pretty much worked with everyone from like the smallest mom and pop like indie game studio you could ever think to big guys like that. We always have a very close process with the developer, with the original talent if we can help it, and with the digital publishers in some cases as well, because we are a game publisher, and if a game is already published digitally, they already have a publisher. So we work with not only that developer, but that publisher at the same time to make something that everyone's super pumped about, very happy about. We have our in-house art team, and they actually come up with a lot of the ideas. We let a lot of the developers come up with their ideas too, and it's just a really big collaborative effort. But we pretty much design everything in-house, and then we pass it by them. So I would say the biggest difference between working with an indie and a AAA is there's a lot more red tape with the AAA, because they've got all these legal departments and there's like all these different places that they have to pass and approve things. But the end result is always the same, is everyone's really happy with the product.
So I remember we talked at GDC a couple of months ago, and you mentioned that for a lot of indie companies, having a physical copy basically means that they can greatly increase their sales numbers. I mean, if you release a game on Steam and there is incredible competition and there are, problems with discoverability, and we know how many games come up basically every day, people just don't have the time to play them, right? And can you explain to our audience, like, how does having kind of your own physical copy help you in discoverability? Maybe, increases word of mouth or something. Like, what are the advantages of kind of going physical?
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely think it does give developers an edge if they have a physical game. I mean, one, it's really cool. It's awesome to have something in your hands physically that you've made. Um, and two, yeah, if a developer works with a company like us, limited run, there's a certain amount of buzz around the products that we publish and that we help develop. So it does kind of help cut through the noise because it is a very competitive space. I mean, log into the Steam store and you'll see every single day, every week, like that front page is changing. There's so much going on. And I think having a physical copy not only gives a certain amount of like legitimacy to your game, but it also helps kind of cut through the noise.
So what about distribution? So if you could tell us a little bit about how your games are being sold. You talked a little bit about that, so that there's pre-orders and you're basically selling from your own, I guess, store. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we are predominantly direct to consumer. So this allows us to not only cut out sort of the middleman, which is traditional retailers, but this also allows us to pay developers a lot more than they would typically make. So if you were to do a full, retail release, and if you sell 100 copies through like a traditional retail release, like a Target or a Walmart, and you sell 100 copies through limited run, you're going to make a lot more with limited run because we have the ability to pay out more royalties because we don't have physical stores. We don't have to, well, we have one physical store now, but it's not like a network or a chain where we have to keep the lights on. So we have to pad that into the price. So typically we just sell through our website, and we do some very small mom and pop retailers like will wholesale like tens of copies just so they're kind of like around. We don't usually work with bigger retailers aside from Best Buy, and our collector's editions are always only found on our website. Recently we just opened a limited run retail store in Raleigh, North Carolina. The grand opening was phenomenal. It was amazing. And if there's any like proof that there's demand in physical games, on our retail day, I believe the line got up to like 7 hours long. There were people that waited in line for 7 hours to get into the store.
You should send us some pictures so we can put them in the video, so then we can illustrate everything. So it's funny that you mentioned this about the kind of the royalties and the shares. So I had a conversation last year with one very big publisher, like makes one of the most, I'm not gonna name names, but it like makes a very successful game. And what they're saying is that having a physical copy for them and distributing physical copies directly, for them, this is the most kind of revenue heavy way of selling, right? Because you don't pay commissions for like Steam Store or other platforms, and those are pretty significant. There's like 30%, right? And I think a lot of developers don't really think about that when they're publishing a game and when they're going to work with a publisher. Because I heard stories and we did surveys when developers are okay with splitting even 50-50, although it makes zero sense to me, especially considering all the channels that you have right now and kind of companies. So how do you work on royalties? How do you make sure that the kind of the sharing is equal and kind of like that it's not ripping the developer off?
Yeah, so I can't really get too into the weeds about like royalties, mostly because I'm not the one who makes the contracts for the royalties, but I do know that limited run is extremely, extremely favorable for the developer. I mean, there's a reason why so many people have worked with us. We've published over 1,000 games, and we are probably one of the least predatory game publishers you'll ever talk to. And I wholeheartedly believe that because one, we usually pay out our developers much more in royalties than us. Two, we don't sit on the rights to their game at all. So in a lot of cases, after we publish your game physically, you have the rights completely back to you, and you can do like what you want with them. So we don't sit on people's rights or IPs. We pay developers a very fair amount, and we basically do everything for them. So if we do decide to publish a game, we're almost like pretty close to a turnkey operation. We have our own in-house art team, our own production team. We know where we're going to print. So all you have to do is work with us to make sure it's a product that you and your fans will like, and then we'll get it done for you and basically cover all the costs that takes to do.
Alena, so talk to us about some of your favorite releases, or maybe some of the most successful releases. Like, what were the games that sold best or were like the biggest hits?
Yeah, so our best-selling game to date is Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game. So, obviously that was like our big white whale. Like, we really, really wanted to get that game because it was, one, it was an awesome game. And two, it was delisted for about 10 years. You couldn't buy it. So once it was announced that it was coming back, we were like, we have to get this game. This means so much to us. This is like everything that our company stands for, right? Is being able to play this game forever, no matter what. So I think that really resonated with the fans too, because it was our top selling game to date. And we got to do like some really amazing stuff with that game. We got to re-release, the soundtracks and everything with Anamanaguchi, which was amazing because our founders are really huge fans of that band as well. And yeah, we've also worked with, huge, awesome companies like Naughty Dog. We did a lot of the Jack and Daxter games. So I think that was a huge success for us as well. Yeah, and then in more recent months, Castlevania has been doing great for us. We did the Castlevania Anniversary Collection and Castlevania Rondo of Blood, which is one of my personal favorites because I love Symphony of the Night. I mean, it's so awesome.
Alena, so you mentioned you have your own art team and you're doing a lot of the kind of ads and box art. And if you go on any channel anywhere, if you go on Steam, if you go on YouTube, one of the first things they teach you is that the thumbnail is the most important part, right? So the thumbnail is kind of like the introduction into the game, and thumbnail basically is box art right now, right? And box art was kind of like this, right now it's sort of like a lost art. Like, how do you make the, before that, like if you go into a little bit of the history, like Activision, EA, all those big publishers, they were super heavily invested in all the figuring out what kind of monster should be on the box. Like, should there be a lady? Should be a man? Like, what are the colors? Because this is how you sold your title. This was like the main advertising. Tell us a little bit about how this changed, and how do you approach kind of creating those amazing, pictures, art for your physical copies?
Yeah, so for the majority of most of the stuff we publish, there's already existing key art for the game. So that's pretty simple. We just kind of figure out how we're going to place that key art. But then in some cases, like for instance with like Castlevania or something like that, we always try to stay true to the original vision of the box. Like box art is sacred to us. It is. And anytime we can get the original artist back on to like create something new, we try to do that. So for Castlevania, for instance, we commissioned Tom Du Bois, who did a lot of the classic Konami box arts, to actually make new box art for us or recreate the old box art. So we did that with a few things. We did a reversible cover for Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game. I wish I had a coffee back over here I could open for you, but we worked with Brian Lee O'Malley, who created the series to make that reversible art for us. So like anytime we can bring back the like original creators, illustrators, or whoever first worked on that game, we'll bring them back in to make something new and cool if we can. But Usually there's key art there that we'll be able to work with. But yeah, it's a very sacred practice, box art.
Alena, except for the disc and kind of the box itself, I know you guys are doing a lot of extra work. So there's a lot of stuff that you can put in the like a collector's edition or like a limited edition. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think there is already a generation of people who don't really understand that, because you buy like a digital deluxe edition of God of War on PlayStation and you get this very weird thing like a digital art book, and there's like soundtrack that you can't really listen anywhere except for like on PlayStation. So yeah, how does that work with you? Like, tell us a bit about the extra little bits that you can put into with the game.
Yeah, so there are just tons of different things that you can put in a collector's edition. There are some restraints, right? So you have to think about one, cost, and two, size. So, fans love having really cool, wild, crazy things in their collector's edition, but depending on what it is, that cost can go up. And then there's a threshold to where it's too much for a fan to want to pay, right? So, for instance, if we have something like Streets of Rage, where we have like a big statue, that's going to be a more pricier collector's edition, but the statue's awesome. So people are going to want it, right? And then there's other things that we have to think about, like the actual box size. Like, how much stuff can we fit in this box? Like, how much is humanly possible? But yeah, there's everything from, coins, art books, CDs. Let me see if I can open one over here for you and kind of show you a cool, what's a good one? Let's do Panzer Paladin. Our podcast is now a unboxing video.
Those are super popular, so I'm happy.
Yeah, so I will open this up and kind of like show you sort of what can be done with a really cool CD. Yeah, so this is probably a bigger box size. Ooh. Yeah, so literally everything down to like, how are we going to package and fit everything in here? That's all stuff that has to be figured out and worked out. Yeah, so we have the game, which comes in this big case. Why does it come in this big case? Well, presentation means a lot too, right? Posters you can have. And I believe for this game, we did some metal figures. So we have multiple of these metal figures in the CE. So like, even down to stuff like this, like, not only does this stuff have to be, it goes through a rigorous approval process with the developers, because they want to make sure that their characters are, portrayed correctly. Like, is she the right height? Is she the right proportion? And then you go into the production, these have to be basically molded. And then once it's made, something like metals, you have to get this stuff tested to make sure it's not toxic. And like, there's just a huge process that goes with all of this that people just, I feel like they don't really think about or appreciate, like how much really goes into doing something like this. But it's a lot of work, but we do think that it is worth it. Let's see, we have another huge, heavy, man, this thing is awesome. Yeah, like, you can't really feel it, but it's extremely heavy. Yeah, so all of our CEs, soundtrack here, double-sided. All of our CEs, we really try to think about, like, what does the fan want? Like, what does the developer think would be really cool? And if you can think of it, we can usually make it happen. Like, no matter what it is, we'll do our best to make it happen.
So thank you for the unboxing. It was incredible. And big kudos to you for doing the metal figurines, because I did oh my god, like, I had this little project where I had to 3D print like a character, and oh my god, that's like the most challenging thing ever, because not only do you have first to prepare the actual model, which is a challenge by itself, but then you need to find the right vendor, and figure out that the colors are right, and then they choose the materials, and then there is the price, the quantity, because it's, you know, it depends on whatever you choose, what kind of resin you're doing, and it's just insane. And you're doing this in metal, so I guess this is even more challenging.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's so much that goes into it, and yeah, sometimes there's times where a developer goes, that's not the right color. It's just not.
Yeah.
And then we do another color. It's like, well, now I don't like the eyes, so we have to do like, 7 or 8 different iterations of something. But we do it to get it right, and then we know everyone's happy with it. Yeah.
I feel like this is very important to have all this kind of good around the franchise, right? So you don't really have the game, but you have like the figurines, CDs, posters, anything. Like from your perspective, who's doing like the best job at kind of utilizing their franchises and kind of creating more goods around them? Like in my opinion, probably when you think about companies like that, it's probably Square Enix, where they're doing this like every time you go like Gamescom or you go to GDC or like E3 probably, where you go to their booth and it's not really about whatever they're releasing. It's mostly about $100 figurines everywhere, and there are lines of people ready to buy them, and they have these huge bags carrying them, and there are posters and all the other stuff. But like from your professional experience, like who do you look after, like who do you like, who does the best job kind of like in this field?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to just like pick one or two companies, like obviously Square Enix does a great job. Um, any company that has their IP and license it out to other companies and like allows them to do more things, I think that's like a great way to get more products out there. Because realistically, if you have this IP and you don't really have the time to do all these little cool things, like we don't have the time to make figures or vinyls or shirts or whatever, and if you license it out to trusted companies that can, I think that's kind of like the right way to do it. I don't know that I could give any good examples off the top of my head, but I think you gave a really good one there with the Square Enix. Yeah.
So let's jump to like the last question I had.
Oh, Star Wars.
Star Wars, yeah, obviously. And Disney probably also does a very good job. They're like, that's their whole business. My question is like, we've seen kind of physical distribution of games kind of die out. Now it's kind of like this little renaissance going on. What does the future hold? Like, what's gonna happen like in 5-10 years? Are we still gonna have physical copies? Because I'm afraid that we're gonna come to there's gonna be a time when there's just not gonna be a slot on the platform. Like, I don't have a CD-ROM like on my, or like a DVD on my computer now.
Yeah, it is. I think that's inevitable for most companies, right? I mean, I watched over the years as, like Apple computers, Apple phones, they slim down more and more every single year. Now you don't have a disk drive, now you don't have a headphone jack, and then everyone else in the industry kind of follows them, right? And I know that inevitably that will probably happen with, Microsoft and Sony. I have an inkling, this is my own personal opinion, but I think Nintendo will not only be the last one to like hold on to this physical aspect, but they may never get rid of it. I mean, they've always historically just kind of like gone with the beat of their own drum. And I think that they still do value physical media over there too. I don't think it was ever a question for them. But I mean, as we saw with the PlayStation, like there's a model without a CD slot, that's a big thing. So I think in the future, eventually, there may come a time. I know for a limited run, we do have a cool thing that I think will be, 20 years from now, probably like the future of our company, which is our carbon engine. which helps us basically preserve retro games. It's an engine that helps developers and us port classic retro games from NES, Game Boy, Sega. The list just goes on and on. You can read more about it on our website, limitedrungames.com. There's a Carbon Engine page, but it helps us port those games to modern platforms like Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, so you can play them and it's kind of preserved, because there's just this huge library of retro games that people just can't play if they don't have the hardware. They're not well versed enough in emulation. So the only way the majority of casual gamers are going to play these games is if they get released on a modern platform. So yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like having a physical copy, as you mentioned a couple of times during this interview, it just means so much, both for developer and for the gamer, right? And it seems like even if we won't have any slots, or like the distribution is going to be all digital, you'll still have something. You will buy maybe a figurine, maybe like a CD. There's still gonna be, because I mean, let's face it, we buy those CDs, we never actually play them. They're just like lying around or something, right? But they're still there. So it's kind of like this, I guess, cultural thing, like for people who like and enjoy video games.
Yeah, no, totally. And knowing limited run, far in the future, if there's no disc slots, like we're going to be putting out collector's editions with codes if we have to, if that's the only way to get this awesome, merch and these collector's items in front of people, then we'll do what we have to do. But I think, our business model and many other companies that are kind of popping up and trying to do something similar, there's definitely a demand. Like, gamers want our physical stuff. We love this. Like, it means something to us. It's nostalgic. Like, we have emotional connections to it. So I don't think it's gonna go away as fast as people assume that it is.
Got it. Okay, so on this optimistic note, I want to say goodbye. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll leave the links in the description so people can check out your website, learn more about Carbon Engine, and kind of figure out what your company does. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for enjoying another episode of the 80 Level Roundtable podcast. Check out upcoming episodes on the 80 Level website at 80.lv. Join our career site at 80.lv/RFP. And share our podcast with friends and on your social networks.